Hello and welcome to another complete Cambridge IGCSE PE lesson, the third topic in Chapter 11, Risk and Risk Assessment. As always, we'll cover absolutely everything you need to know for your exam, and today you need to be able to identify and describe the differences between real and perceived risk, assess risks in different environments, and suggest strategies for reducing risk and injury in physical activities. Participating in any sport or physical activity involves at least some level of risk, and in certain sports, injuries are common and often severe. For those in charge of organising sports events or training sessions, it's important to identify any potential harm that might occur so that precautions can be taken to make the activity as safe as possible. There are two different types of risk that you need to know, and these are real risk and perceived risk. Real risk is the amount of danger that actually exists in the activity, or in other words, the level of risk after taking into account safety controls and measures such as rules and protective equipment. Perceived risk, on the other hand, is an individual's subjective or personal judgment about the dangers of an activity, which varies from person to person and may differ significantly from real risk, which can be statistically calculated using a risk assessment. We'll return to risk assessments later on, but first let's take a look at some practical examples that help to explain the differences between real and perceived risk. Number 1. Rock climbing may be perceived as high risk due to the severe consequences associated with falling. However, the presence of qualified instructors and the use of helmets, ropes and harnesses that secure climbers to the wall mean that real risk is relatively low. Number 2. Students participating in a javelin lesson may perceive the activity as high risk as the javelin itself is a sharp and dangerous object. However, the teacher has completed a risk assessment and has many safety measures in place, including waiting zones and a no running policy when collecting the javelin, meaning real risk is actually far lower. The next thing that you need to be able to do is to assess risks in different environments. A risk assessment, which is defined as the process used to evaluate the real risks involved in an activity, is carried out by the teacher, coach or event organiser to ensure that activities are conducted as safely as possible. The first stage in this process is to identify any potential risks, so why not pause the video here and list as many as you can think of for these two scenarios. So let's review the first example, starting with some environmental risks, which are those that relate to the environment itself as opposed to the behaviour of the people within it. Environmental risks could include heat stroke or lightning strikes as the swimming pool is outside, slipping on the wet floor, objects or equipment beside the pool that could cause someone to trip and fall, drowning due to overcrowding and the depth of the pool, cuts or grazes caused by poorly maintained facilities, and coming into contact with cleaning chemicals such as chlorine. Behavioural risks, on the other hand, are those that relate to the characteristics of the swimmers and their behaviour during the session. Firstly, we have the ability of the swimmers themselves, as young children and weak swimmers may have a greater risk of drowning. Running around the pool area could lead to slipping or collisions, and the position and number of lifeguards on duty will influence their ability to spot and respond to dangerous situations. Jumping into crowded areas or diving in the shallow end could lead to impact injuries, and inflatables could trap swimmers under the surface and make it difficult for lifeguards to spot the danger. So now that we've identified some risks, the next stage is to calculate a risk rating for each one. In this method, risks are given a rating from 1 to 5 based on A, how severe it could be, and B, how likely it is to occur. These two ratings are then multiplied using the equation risk equals severity times likelihood to provide a risk rating between 1 and 25. This process helps organisers to see which factors need to be addressed in order to make the activity safer. As you can see in this example, collisions that might result from diving into a crowded pool have been given a 3 for severity and a relatively high 4 for likelihood. These values are multiplied, giving us a moderate risk rating of 12 out of 25. Drowning, on the other hand, is obviously extremely severe, but it's also very rare and therefore unlikely to happen, reflected in a low risk rating of 5 out of 25. Our final learning objective requires you to identify strategies that could be put in place to minimise risk and make activities safer. Why not pause the video again to see if you can come up with some strategies of your own that address each of the 3 risk factors identified. Injuries that result from physical contact or tackling, cuts and grazes from falling on the abrasive artificial surface, and lightning hitting the playing area. To reduce the risk of contact injuries, it's important to ensure that all players are wearing shin pads, that the rules of the game are well communicated and consistently upheld, that players are of a similar age or size, that football boots are worn to prevent slipping while tackling, and that all players have been educated on how to tackle safely. To combat the risk of cuts or grazes, which are common when playing on abrasive artificial surfaces, long socks could be worn to protect the skin, studs or boots designed for AstroTurf improve grip and prevent slipping. A first aid kit and trained first aider should be present to provide treatment if needed, and the pitch should be checked before the game and cleared of any litter or sharp objects like broken glass. Finally, for parts of the world that experience frequent storms, alarms that detect static electricity in the atmosphere can be used to warn the players and coaches that they need to evacuate the area. Lightning rods are also used to conduct lightning away from the pitch and players. Well done, you've just covered everything you need to know on topic 11.3, risk and risk assessment. Double check that you understand everything you need to, and come back next time for the final lesson of the IGCSE PE course, Injuries. As always, I hope you found this lesson useful, and I'll see you in the next one.